We are just about to start. Okay, so a couple of people have replied and they can all see my presentation slide. So I'm just going to go ahead to start today's class. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Introduction to Java class. And in today's class, we're going to be looking into variables, data types, and operators in Java. And the topics we're going to cover today would also include identifiers, reserved words, variables, data types, and the different operators that are used in Java, and the different data types as well. So the next slide, would be about the identifiers in Java. And when we hear of the word identifiers, they are in programming languages, then identifiers are used for identification purposes. And if you look everywhere around you, you've got like a chair, you've got a table, you've got your laptop, or even your telephone. They all have names, and names are identifiers that help to identify objects around us. So that's basically what identifier is, for identification purposes. And in Java, an identifier can be a class name, method name, variable name, or label. And we looked into examples of class name last week, method name, and also variable names. But we're going to go further into all of this today. So I'm just checking okay, good. So we're just going to go ahead now to the next slide. And this is an example of the Java syntax that we looked into last week. And the only difference between last week's one and this week's one is just the names of the class and the variable name as well. So I'm going to go on to the next slide to tell you the different types of identifiers that we can find in here. Or before I go ahead, can anyone tell me how many identifiers we have in this particular Java syntax? Any guesses or anyone that actually knows, that would be good. I mentioned identifiers in Java can be class name, variable name, method name, or label. So can anyone tell me how many identifiers they can find in this syntax? So someone said 2, someone said 3, someone said 4. So let's see what the correct answer is. The correct answer is actually 5. So we have the class name called ABC. We have the method name called main. We have the variable name called Z. We have the predefined class name called string. And then we have the argument or variable name called args. So moving on, we have the different rules for identifiers. And these are the rules that apply to identifiers in Java and for defining a valid Java identifiers. And these rules must be followed, otherwise our code will be showing compiler time errors. And also these rules are also valid for C and also C++. And the first rule that we have in no particular order is that the only characters in Java identifiers are caps locks, like lower cases, upper cases, numbers, $sign, and underscores. And an example of this could be, like we've seen previously, an example of an identifier, a valid identifier here is ABC. It has caps lock. The main is got like lower cases. It Could also be like a single letter as well, like the variable also. And then we have the variable name here that has more than one single letter in it. So this is one of the rules that applies to Java identifiers. And I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to type a word in here, and I'm going to ask whether this is a valid identifier or not. So if we have something like, if we have an example like this, I'm just trying to think of a word. So something like this, gecko and the @ symbol, is this a valid identifier or not? No. Yeah, the answer is correct. So no, it is not a valid identifier because it has the @ symbol in it. So well done to everyone that got that. So the next rule states that predefined class names and interface names can be used. Predefined Java class names and interface names can be used. And an example of a predefined class name, like we've seen in our previous example up here, is string. String is considered a reserved word and also a predefined class name. So that is why it can be used or it can be classified as an identifier. And interfaces, we would look further into that later on in the course as well, but probably not today. But that is just one of the rules you should know for naming or for identifying valid identifiers in your code. And the next one says identifiers cannot start with a digit. And this simply means that it cannot start with 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And that is just one of the rules, because if they start with a digit, then it's not going to be considered a valid identifier. So something like 1, 2, 3, 4 gecko is not a valid identifier. And the next rule states that identifiers are case sensitive. So you just need to be careful whenever you are using your identifiers in different places in your program. So if it starts with ABC in your first project and you want to use it in your second project, it has to be ABC. It cannot be ABC. Then it's just not going to find it. Or you just be wondering, like, why is this not showing? Obviously, because your first letter is not capitalized. So Java identifiers are case sensitive. And the next rule is there is no length limit for Java identifiers. And the advised length of letters that you should use should be between 14 to 15 letters. So you can have a very long name as your identifier as far as it makes sense and it is readable as well, then yes, but you're always advised to use between 4 to 15 letters. And then the next rule states that reserved words cannot be used. We are going to look into reserved words later on because we have 53 reserved words in Java. So they cannot be used or classified as identifiers. So an example like this integer y equals 5. The integer is our data type. The while is meant to be our variable name, but while is considered a reserved word. And in this case, this is not a valid identifier in this particular scenario. So that is why reserved words are not used or cannot be used as an identifier. So we are going to move on to the we're going to look into reserved words later on, like I mentioned. So we'll move on to the next slide, which states examples of valid identifiers that we can have in our project. So an example like my program, my program, my program. They are all identifiers, but they are not going to be considered the same because, like we mentioned, our identifiers are case sensitive. So whenever you're using, just be careful whenever you're writing identifiers and make sure, like when you're using it elsewhere, is exactly the same copy as what you want, or else it's going to come up as an error because you're using the wrong identifier name, and identifiers are case sensitive. So let's keep that in mind. So now I would like us to go into our IntelliJ, and this is just to like show you like the practical side as well as the theoretical side. So today I'm going to be moving between the two slides, between the PowerPoint presentation and also IntelliJ as well. And I hope we have been able to install Java last week, set up our environment variables, and also install IntelliJ as well. And we've already tried some of the examples we did last week as well, and we were able to do some things. Because no one came to me, or only one person came to me for help, and I was able to help the person. But I hope everyone in the group right now have Java installed, Java environment set up, and also IntelliJ installed as well. So hopefully there's no issue so far. So I'm just going to go on to show my IntelliJ screen now and just give you some practical side of what identifiers are and how they work as well. Sorry, my IntelliJ is just taking a while to load. Can you all see the IntelliJ screen now? No, okay, I'll just share my whole screen then. I think I'm sharing just my PowerPoint. So you should be able to see my whole screen now. Please, can I get some answers in the comment section, please? Can you see my PowerPoint and the IntelliJ overlapping on the screen? No. Yes, okay, good. So now I'm just going to try to create a new project for my IntelliJ, for my identifier practical. So we have to click on Java, then click on next, and then next again. Then I need to give my project a name. So I'm going to call this Java Identifiers. So I'm just going to wait for this to finish loading. And once the project is ready, I will then create a new Java file. And to create a Java file, you need to make sure that you're creating it into the SRC folder. Then you right click on that, click on new, then you see Java class, because that's what we need. So that's what we have to click on. And I'm going to call these identifiers. and make sure like your cursor is on the class and not the interface or any other one. Click on enter, and this should be created just under the SRC. And then, yeah, so here we are. And like I already mentioned in the presentation slide, I'm just going to try to bring that up again. The class name here would be our identifier. Then we'll create the method name and every other thing in this project now. Let me see if I can put this side by side. Public static void. We looked into this one last week. So an identifier in this particular case is going to be our class name, which is called identifiers. It can be anything reasonable or meaningful. Then the other identifier that we have in here is our method name called main. Then we have the variable name as well called age. And then we have the predefined Java class name called string. Then we have the argument of variable name called arg. So everything I've mentioned so far are all classified as identifiers. Now I want us to look into the rules again to see how they all apply practically. So one of the rules says that identifiers cannot start with a digit. So for example, I would say so you can see, like I used a digit to start my variable name in this case, 1 to 3 name, and you can obviously see that it's showing an error at the side here. So basically, this is just telling you that this is invalid. So you just have to change it to something that is considered valid and is accepted in Java programming language. So assuming I remove this name, the 1, 2, 3, then we have a valid variable name here. And then another rule states that, another rule states that the only allowed characters in Java identifiers are caps lock, capitalized A to Z, or small letter A to Z, then numbers and $ signs and underscores. So if I'm to put an underscore in here, it would still be accepted. It's only categorized as an error. Or if I put a $ here as well, it's also categorized as a valid identifier. And the other one I want to look at is there is no length limit for Java identifiers. So I'm just going to duplicate this line and change this one to change the variable name here to something that is between 14 to 15 and also more than 15 as well. So I'm just going to do that now. 15. So this is still considered as a valid, this is 15F and it's considered as a valid identifier. So if I'm to increase it to 20 or more, it's still going to be considered as valid, but it's always advisable to have it between 14 to 15 and also to have it as something meaningful as well and readable. So in this case, I wouldn't have like 25 Fs as my variable names because then I don't know what this 20 is getting stored as, if you get what I mean. But I'm going to explain later on. But it's always good to use meaningful names for your variable names in your code. And the next one says that reserved words cannot be used. An example of a reserved word that we saw earlier was while. So I'm going to try that now. Yep. So this is a reserved word and it is not getting accepted as a valid identifier in this case. So we would not usually use reserved words as stated in the rule. So I'm going to comment that line out. And then we've looked into examples of valid identifiers. If I'm to use X plus Y, this would be considered as valid. So I'm going to change this while here to X plus Y. Okay, I'm not sure why this is showing like this. X plus Y. That's strange. X plus Y. So let's just use something simpler, like sum and division. Okay, now my cursor is hanging. I'm not sure why I can't find the cursor. Okay, sorry about that. I'm just going to try to, oh, right, fine, I can see now. So this isn't getting accepted as well. So I'm not sure why this is coming up as failed, because it's meant to still be classified as a valid identifier. Take this one out. I probably need to look into why that is coming up as an error, because it is meant to be classified as a valid identifier. So I'm not sure why it's coming up as an error, but I would look into that. Oh, anyway, so I've changed the reserved name while to sum underscore, and this is considered as a valid identifier. And then we're going to move on to the next slide that looks into reserved words. And I mentioned previously that there are 53 reserved words in Java. And reserved words are predefined words that represent certain meanings or functionalities. And they are considered as reserved words, and they are only in lower cases. We have 53 of them, 50 keywords, and also 3 literals. And then the keywords define functionalities while the literals define values. So an example of the literals are true, false, and null. And the other 50, we have the used keywords and the unused keywords. The used keywords are used for defining functionalities in our codes. And an example of them are short, integer, long, float, double, if, else, while, the while word that we were using before, do, private and public, like we are using in our code, the public word, the static as well, and the final. And then we have the try, catch, throw. We have the class and the interfaces. We have the new, super. We have the void and the enum. And then the unused one, they are the ones that are not used regularly or constantly. We have the constant, the go-to as well. So these are reserved words in Java, and they cannot be used as identifiers at all. And they always have to be in lower cases as well. So that's just one thing for you to have for your knowledge purposes. But there are different resources online available for you to read if you want to know more about reserved words in Java. So now we're going to move on to the next slide, which talks about variables. So next, we are looking into variables. And a variable is a name given to a memory location. It is also considered as a basic unit of storage in a program. And then variables values, they can change during different execution within your project. And in Java, all variables must be declared before they can be used. And one thing to also note is that variable names must be unique. And the unique word is capitalized. It must be unique. And then there are different ways to declare variables in Java. So in this image here, this is an example of one of the ways to declare variables in Java. And this is just called variable initialization. We are going to look at it further in the next slide, but I just wanted you to have an idea, like this type of variable declaration is called variable initialization. And if we move on to the next slide, like I said, there are two-step processes to variable creation. We have the declaration and the variable initialization. So the first method that we saw previously is just declaring the variable. That is telling your program what the variable name is. So in this instance, we have variable name called first variable, and the data type that we want to use is called int or integer. And for the next step for declaration variable creation, we can then initialize the variable. So this can be done in two separate lines, or it can be done in one single line. For the declaration, we do them on two separate lines. That is, the first step will be declaring the variable int first variable, and then initializing the variable, that is giving the variable a value. So we want to give the first variable the value of 20. So that is why we are initializing it here with the equals sign. So in this case, we have first variable taking the value of 20. Then for the second step, we have variable initialization, or for method 2, we'll join the two of them together, called declaration and initialization combined. So I'm going to demonstrate this in IntelliJ as well for you to see how it is all done, because method 1, in having 2 steps, and also method 2 just having 1 step, they basically are the same. It's just us separating them in method 1, and in method 2, we are combining them together. So instead of having 2 lines, we can add them on 1 line. Then we have the data type here, the variable name, and the value of 20. So this is integer first variable taking the value of 20. So I'm just going to move into IntelliJ now to show you how all of this works out, like demonstrating the method 1 and also the method 2 as well. So I'm going to open another project to look into this. Hopefully you can all see my IntelliJ fully. New project. And we're basically going to follow the same steps we've been following in terms of creating new projects. And the project name would be Java variables. And I'm going to create a Java file under the SRC. Call that variables. Clicking on class. And this is getting created for me. Public static. And the first method has 2 steps. So for step 1 is just basically declare your variable. So we have int first variable, and then we put our double column at the end. And then the next step is initializing the variable that is given the first variable a value. So that's step 2. And that would be first variable. You can see that it's also getting auto-filled here. So we're going to double click on that. And I'm going to give it the value of 20. So this is the first method that we looked at in the so this was the first method we looked at in our presentation slide that had 2 steps. To declare your variable, you can use this method or the second method we're going to look at. So the first method will basically be declaring your variable, then initializing it, that is giving it a value. Then for our second method, would be the combination of both. And that would be declaration and initialization combined. So this would be int second variable and I'm going to give it the value of 30. So you can decide to use this method here, which is much more preferable because then you get to save space. Your code wouldn't look too crowded on the on your code, like your code wouldn't look too crowded when it's getting looked at. Or if you want to start with the first method that has 2 steps, then that's also fine with you as well. So in this case, I'm going to try to add the first variable and the second variable together as integer first variable So what I have done here is to get the sum of the first and second variable, which is 20 plus 30, and store the value in total. So total is just basically like a container holding the value of 20 plus 30, which is 50. So now if I want to print out, I can decide to print out the first variable, second variable, and also the variable called total. So let's try to do that now. So we'll see the different values that are going to get printed out. I'm just going to duplicate the slides. So I'm just going to try to run this now, and this should print out the value of the first variable, which is 20, second variable, which is 30, and the sum of the first and second variable, which would then be 50 as the sum total. So let's just see what the value gives us in the console below. So it's just loading here. Sorry, it's just taking a while to load. Yep. So this is the result we have below here by printing out the first, second, and the sum total. So we have the first to be 20, second to be 30, and the sum total to be 50. So this is basically what you need to know about variables. Variables are considered to be containers, and they can be declared in two major steps. You can decide to do declaration first and initialize later, or you can do the declaration and initialization combined together in a single line. And I hope you were able to get that part. And I'm going to be answering questions later on towards the end. So we're just going to move on to the next part of the slide, which is Java naming conventions. So for the Java naming conventions, I think you would have noticed some of the ways that I write my project name, or even some of the ways that I write my class name as well. So the Java naming conventions are the steps or guidelines that help our Java code to look readable and also for good maintenance as well. And Java uses the camel case as a practice for writing the method names, variables, packages, classes, and constants. And the camel case consists of compound words or phrases, and they could be like two words joined together. For example, mountain bikes, or it could be a single word as well. So we would look at the classes and interfaces. So for our class name, I'm sure we all know what the class name is. So if we look at our IntelliJ, the class name here is called Identifier for this particular project. And in the new project we created, the class name here is called Variables. So now if we go back to our presentation slide, class name should be nouns, and the first letter of the word should be capitalized. And you can see from the projects from identifiers and variables, they were all capitalized. And interface name should be capitalized as well. Interfaces will be looked into later on in the course as well when we are looking into OP, object-oriented programming aspects. But I just wanted to know that the names must be capitalized as well. For instance, in this case, we have bicycle, which is an interface and it is capitalized. And then we have the mountain bikes, which is a compound word containing two words, and they are also capitalized too. And you need to avoid acronyms and abbreviations and use all words instead. And then we move on to methods. So camel cases are also used for writing our method names, and the methods must be verbs. And in some cases, it could be like a combination of two words as well. So for an example here, the method name here is called speed up. And the first word, the speed, the first letter is lowercase, and the second letter of the first letter of the second word is then uppercase. So this is how, if you're having a method name that has two words joined together, this is how you're expected to write your method name. The first letter of the first word would be lowercase, and the first letter of the second word would be uppercase, and they have to be joined together, no space in between. And then if we move on to variables as well, variables are meant to be meaningful and also short, and they can start with either underscores or $sign as well. And first character variable names are also not advisable to be used, like something like the letter A. Well, A is not meaningful, it's just like just one word. So we really don't know what the value is going to be taken in terms of someone else coming to read your code. So that's as always advised to use meaningful but short names. And then we'll move on to constant variables. Constant variables, like an example of constant variables here is this positive infinity and this nan word, and they should all be upper cases. And if you are using two words as your constant variable, they must be separated by an underscore. And if we move on to package also, we have different packages in Java based on what you want to use them for in your project. So it's always advisable that prefix of a unique package name is always written in lower cases. And you can see an example in here. The prefix is the cucumber.api, the cucumber.junit, and then this one is just the uk.co.ac.acceptance test, and they all have to be in lower cases because they are considered as prefix. So these are the common naming conventions that we have for some of the identifiers that we use in Java. And then there are also resources online for you to look into this and also get a better understanding as well. There are free resources online to read on us there. And I also shared some links last week, so you can always go through those links to get a better understanding of everything I've spoken about. And if you have any questions, just let me know in the Telegram group and I'll be able to answer them. So before we move on to the next part of the lesson, which is data types, I will try to answer questions around identifiers and reserved words that I see in the comment section now. So if you have any questions, just let me know and I would answer them. So how do you ask for help regarding Java? Just type it in the group, in the Telegram group, and just tag me there, and I would be able to help you. And the next question also says, does it have to be written as a string with speech? But I really don't understand what that means. If you can explain again, Flow iPad, that would be great. And Bacon says, how do I practicalize what you're teaching? It's still technical for me. You practicalize by doing the practical side as well on your own IntelliJ on your laptop. And if you have any issues, just let me know in the Telegram group as well. I'll be able to help you. Why did we duplicate the names with initial cap? Why did we duplicate the names? Please, what names are you referring to? If everyone that have asked questions could further re-explain their questions in the next 2 minutes, that would be great. Or else I'm just going to move on to the next part and then answer the questions towards the end. Okay, so another question just came in. When you were about to print, your first variable twice with the first one having initial caps. Okay, I'm going to look at the project again. And then, so I think you are referring to line 16. So this is basically a string, and this is just how I want my own output to look like. It doesn't have to do with the code at all. So this first variable is how I want my output to look like. And I just want it to look neat. I can decide to have first variable, like capital, small letter V for the variable side. And you can also realize that I put a space after the double column as well. This is just to make my output look nice. So if I run this one again, the variable for the first variable, the V in the first variable would have a small letter V. And there's nothing actually wrong with it because that's just how I want it to look like. So I want my result to be presentable and also readable as well. So that's why I have it like this. And the second variable like this, sum total like this. I just want it to look presentable. That's why I have it like this. I can decide to remove the space between all of them, but then to me, it's not going to look presentable. To other people, it might, but I just like my code to look presentable and neat, to be honest. But yeah. Any course material apart from the YouTube, please. I posted some links last week, so if you can scroll up to the top of last week's class, I posted some free resources on where you can look into Java programming. Yeah, the links are actually useful, and I still use them today, even in my every day-to-day work environment. Yeah. Gerard, I can't re-explain everything again now because I need to go into another topic, but you can always look into the recorded sections, and then if you have any questions, just let me know in the Telegram group and I'll be able to help. And yes, this is kind of linked to your automation as well. You would obviously use variables in your automation scripts. You will use data types. You would use some operators where necessary as well. So yes, it's kind of linked as well. For the Telegram group, someone would obviously I can ask the admin to post the link later on, or kindly remind me at the end of the class, and I'll post the link again to join the Telegram group. So, so before I leave this one, I'm just going to show you what I meant previously. So I removed the space between the double column and the apostrophe, and you can see in the result that it is no longer there. So the reason why I put it there previously was to make the results look good. But now I've removed it, but there is still no difference apart from the space, but it's always good for your code to look good. So I hope I was able to answer your question, Flo. So we're just going to move on to data types now. Data types. So as you can see from this image that I have down here on the screen, there are two types of data types in Java. We have the primitive data type and the non-primitive data type. And data types for variables tell Java the type of values we are going to store in that variable. And like I mentioned previously, variables are considered to be containers. And we've been using data types right from last week and even in the earlier part of today's lesson. We use data types alongside variables. And this basically tells Java the type of values that are storing inside that variable container. And for the data types, we have the primitive and non-primitive. And we're going to be looking into the primitive data types today. And this looks into Boolean, Char, called character, the integer data type, and the floating point data types. And we're going to do practical sides of these data types as well for each and every one of them. Hopefully time permits, but I will try my best to look into every single one of them for the primitive data types. So for the bytes, and the byte is considered to be under integer. Okay, I'm just going to list them out here. So for the Boolean type, we have Boolean. For the character value, we have the character. For the integer, we have 4 types. We have the bytes, we have short, we have int or integer, and then we have the long. For the floating point, we have 2. We have the float and the double. So we're going to look into each and every one of the primitive data type, that is all of the ones mentioned here, and also look into the practical side as well. So for the byte is an 8-bit signed to complement integers, and it is used for storing memories in large arrays. And this is just for all of this here is just for like your basic knowledge. You really don't have to cram every single thing. You really don't have to memorize them as well. You can always Google it, but for your own understanding, it's always good to know that the byte is a 2-bit signed complement integer. The short is a 16-bit. The int or the integer is a 32-bit. The long is a 64-bit signed to complement integers. And the byte, the short, and the long are used to store large values of arrays or integer, while the int itself, just the 32 bits, is used to store relatively small values. And they all have a default value of 0. And they have a maximum and a minimum value. For the bytes, we have minus 128 to 127. For the short, we have minus 32,700 to 32,700. And the int, we have minus 2 billion. And then minus 2 billion to 2 billion. And for the long, we have this value down here. And you don't have to cram everything, but this is just for your own knowledge. So I'm going to go into the practical side now. And we are opening IntelliJ the same way we've always been opening it. And we will call this data types. Then we'll go ahead to create our Java class under the SRC folder. Still loading, good. So we have the SRC, right click, new Java class. And I'll call that one integer. Go on to do the normal setup. And in here, I'm just gonna write down some things for everyone's information. So this is the primitive data type. The integer. And like we said in the presentation slide, the byte is the 8 bits, and the minimum bit is, if you look at the minimum bit, that should be minus 128. And the maximum bit is 127. And for the short, it is 16 bits. Minus 32, 760. And then one other thing to notice is assuming you want to put, for 1000, you would have 1,000. So in IntelliJ, instead of using the comma, you have to use an underscore. So that's going to serve as your comma when you're trying to divide your numbers into the 1000 digits, or like 32,000, for instance. We have 32 comma, but it's going to be an underscore then 762. So this is the minimum, and then the maximum is 32767. The next one is byte, is the int, so that's 32 bits. The minimum integer is and the maximum and then we have the long as well, and the long is considered to be 64 bits. And for the long, we always have an L at the back. So these are the 4 types of integer data types that we have: the byte, the short, the int, and the long. And these are the maximum and minimum, and the default values for all of them is 0. So assuming you don't have an assigned value for one of your bytes variables, then the value that will be assigned by your programming system would be 0. So if we go on to the next slide, and the next slide looks into the floating points. And for the floating points, so the floating point, we have the float and the double. And the float is used to save memories in large variables, in large arrays of floating point numbers. And the double is for decimal values. So I'm going to show you how they also work in IntelliJ. And the syntax for writing your float data types is the float word, like this, and then your variable name. So your variable name can be, the variable name can be float. It doesn't have to be float bar. It can be anything. So it can be, I don't know why it's so hard to think. Float. I'm just going to use desk. So it can be float desk. It can be anything reasonable and meaningful. And then for your double, it has the syntax double, the keyword double as your data type, and then a variable name that is short and meaningful. And the float, it has up to 7 decimal values, while the double has up to 16 decimal values, and they both have default value of 0. So if we look into the float double, I'm going to do some calculations for the float double to show you how it works as well. So I'm going to create another Java class and call that float double. I'm going to copy this. So for the float double, I'm going to declare some variables, do some calculations, and then show you how the float double works. So I'm going to have integer (10) divided by 2. This is just some basic calculation. So if I'm to print out the value of my norm, this should give me 5. So I'm going to try to run this one now, and it should give me the value of 5, and this is going to be considered an integer. Assuming, I'm just going to wait for that one to run, but I'm going to keep talking. Or assuming I'm going to ask a question now. We have our data type to be integer and is expecting a whole number. 10 divided by 2 would give me 5. That is what my result is going to show me. But assuming I have 10 divided by 3 in this occasion, so who can tell me what my result is going to be like? So I have 10 divided by 2, and my result came out as 5, which is correct, an whole number. So if I have 10 divided by 3, what will my result be? Can anyone tell me in the comment section, please? 10 divided by 3. Okay, so I've gotten 2 answers. Someone told me 3.33, 3.33. Someone said 3. So only one answer is correct, and that is Lekon. The answer is going to be 3, because my data type here is integer. Integer is going to give me an whole number. So if I run this one now, it should give me 3. But assuming I want to see the other decimal point, that is where float and double come in. So I'm going to duplicate this one and include the float and the double. So you can see here, the result came out as 3. So those that got 3, well done. But for those that said 3.333, I'm going to show you how to get the other decimal, how to output the other decimal places, assuming you want to use that. So I'm going to use float, and I'm going to use double. And the reason why our variable name is showing as invalid is because it's been used before, and we said variable names have to be unique. So I'm going to change this one to a different variable name, and also this one as well. And I'm going to put an F and a D. So F for float, D for double. So F is going to show me 7. F should show me 7 decimal places or 7 decimal points, while the double should show me up to 16 decimal points. So I'm going to try to print them out correctly. And I'm going to run this one now. Float double, run. It's taking time. Yeah. So the first one says integer data type is going to give me just the whole number, 10 divided by 3, 3. The float, 10 divided by 3, 3.333, 7 decimal places. And if I'm to count this one, it show me 7 threes after the decimal point. For the double, it's going to show me 16 decimal places. So if I'm to count this, it's going to show me I should have 16 decimal places after the decimal point. So these are the type of data types you would use in your code if you want your result, if you know you're expecting your result to have decimal points at the end, then you have to use float or you use double. You wouldn't want to use integer because integer will just show you the whole number and then cut out the rest of the decimal points. So this is where float and double come in whenever you need it or need them in your code. And I hope everyone is able to understand that. So the next thing we're going to look at is the Boolean and the character data type. So the Boolean data types, the Boolean is basically simple. It represents only one bit of information and the result is either true or false. And the syntax you have to use is the Boolean syntax, and then the Boolean syntax as your data type, and then your variable name. And the default value for Boolean is always false. And the char, or the character data type, is used to store characters and Unicode characters. So Unicode characters like this one that represents 0, or the highest one that represents 65,535. And the default is obviously going to be 0. And we can always Google the Unicode characters online. And then we're going to try to do some practical examples now for you to see what the output is going to look like. So we're going to go back to our IntelliJ, create a new Java class called Boolean char, Boolean character. I'm just going to delete this one. So the Boolean character, or the Boolean data type, as it would either produce a true or a false value. And the syntax is Boolean, and then the variable name, and my variable name is my Boolean. And I'm going to give it the value of false. And then I'm going to try to print this out. Add my double quote. Oh, I'm using the wrong one. And the semicolon at the end. So if I'm to run this one now, my Boolean value is going to show me the value that I've already assigned to the variable name, which would be false. So I'm going to run this one now, and the value should come out as false. And while that one is running, you're going to try the syntax for the character data type. And to use the character data type in your IntelliJ, you use the keyword char, C-H-A-R. And this value that I have here, I got it from the I got it online from Unicode. So you can just type Unicode characters, and then it's going to show you the different Unicode characters that you can always pick from. So for instance, assuming I don't know what this Unicode character is going to print out, I'm going to try to print that one out now. Oh, I'm running the wrong one. Just going to run this one. So why is this one not running? Let's run it again. Okay. So this should give me the value of false, and this should give me the character value of what this Unicode represents. So for my result, my Boolean is false because that was the value I assigned to it. And this Unicode character represents X. So that is why we have X here. So assuming I put true in here, I can't use, so for the Boolean data type, I can't use numbers, I cannot use strings. So if I have value of 20, it's going to show me an error because, and it says required Boolean provided integer. I provided an integer and I'm requiring a Boolean. And Boolean represents true or false. So I can only use true or false in this case. So if I use true, I'm going to get true in my results down here in the console. So this is how you use the char or the Boolean data types within your code. So this should come out as true for me for my Boolean. So this is just the way they are used in your code whenever you want to use them. And the next thing on our slide is to look at the operators that we have in Java. So there are different operators in Java. We have the arithmetic, unary, assignment, relational, logical, ternary, shift, and bitwise. And we're going to take a look at, I think, 6 or 7 of them today. And I would want us to pay close attention to some of these operators I'm going to be talking about. Some of them are straightforward. There are some of them that are a bit tricky, and you need to pay close attention whenever you want to use them in your code. And they are also going to be useful as well, even in terms of your web development or your automation, or even like normal Java programming as well. So it's quite good to pay close attention to this particular side of the lesson. And I'll be able to answer some of your questions afterwards. And as I speak about each one of them, I'm going to go and do the practical side as well, and then come back to the presentation slide too. So the first one we have is called the arithmetic operators. That's the next slide. So the arithmetic operators, they are used to perform basic or simple arithmetic operations. And then we have the addition, the subtraction, division, and the multiplication. And then we also have the modulo. And we are going to take a look at this one when we are in our IntelliJ IDE to see how each one of them works, especially the modulo. So I'm just going to go straight there now because we know what addition does. Add two things together. Subtraction, take one thing from another. Division is to divide. Multiplication is to multiply. And the modulo basically gives us the remainder of division if there's any remainder left. So I'm going to look into how all of this all looks in IntelliJ now. So where are we? Create a new project. Come on, come on. I'm sorry, my IntelliJ is just taking a while to load. So we create a new project the same way we've been creating it. Next. Oh, okay. And then I'm going to give you a project name called Java Operators _ 2021. Click on finish. Good. And then we create every file we're going to use under the src folder. And the first operator we are looking at is called the Arithmetic Operators. So from here on, we are going to be using the variable declaration types that we looked at previously. We'll be using the system.out.print. So everything will start to come into place little by little. So yeah, I'm going to create a method in this class that we have now. Public static and then I'm going to declare my variables that I want to use for this particular programming. Integers, SR is 5. Let me use 20. C would have T would have 25. So this is another way we can declare variables instead of having integer B or integer C. So instead of having them on a single line, we can also have them on one straight line and having just one data type. As far as the data type is the same for each of the variables that you need it for. So that is the only case that you can have your variable declarations on a single line. So assuming your B is a string, then that has to go to a new line. Or assuming your B and C are strings, then they have to be out in a new line, and then your integer for A and D will be on another line. But in this case, our data type is the same for A, B, C, and D. So we're going to have them on one single line. So we're going to go on our arithmetic operators. Then this cover the plus, the minus, division, multiplication, and the modulo. That's just like the percentage sign. And then I'm going to try to do some arithmetic operations and see what the results are going to be like. And I'm just going to duplicate some of these lines for each of the single operators. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just fixing them up. B divided by C. Let me do C divided by A. No, C divided by B. And then we have D modulo B. Yep, that should be correct. Modulo B, good. So now I want us to, before we run this test, I want us to have all the values at the side, and then we'll run it to make sure the values are correct and we are getting the expected result. And I want us to do it together. So for the first line, we want to print out A plus B. A is 20, B is 10. So A plus B is 30. Do we all agree? That should be the right value. Can I get some answers? Yes. So A plus B, 20 plus 10, we should have 30 for this first line. Then A minus B, that is 20 minus 10. We should have 10 for this one. And then we have A times B, that's 20 times 10, that would be 200. Then we have C divided by B. So what would C divided by B be? 15 divided by 10. So what would our answer be? Can anyone tell me? We have 15 divided by 10. So what would the answer be? 1. Yeah, that's correct. 1. And then we have D modulo B. And I said the modulo would be the remainder of a division. So 25 divided by 10 would be what? So what's the remainder of 25 divided by 10? Okay, some people are responding. So that would be 5. Yep, 5. 5. So now let's try to run this one, and we will double check our answers here with what we have in the console down here. Yes, A plus B 30, A minus B 10, A times B 200, C divided by B 1, and then D divided by B 5. So I hope we understand how the modulo works. So the modulo just basically gives us the remainder of a division. So if we have 15 divided by 10, if we have 15 modulo 10, then our answer would be 5 because that is the remainder. But if we have 15 divided by 10, then our answer would be 1. So this is just how the arithmetic operation works. And I hope we understand that before we move on to the next operator type. So the next operator type that we have is called the unary operator. And for the unary operator, we have the different types as well. We have the unary minus, which is just like a basic minus, and it is used to convert a negative value to a positive value, or a positive value to a negative value. And then we have the increment operator. And the increment operator is got two types. We have the post increment and the pre-increment. The post increment is when the value is assigned or used first, and then the increment is done afterwards. And then the pre-increment is a situation whereby the value is increased and then the new value is then used. I'm going to explain all of this in the code because it's better to understand it when I'm doing the practical side, because the theoretical side may not probably make sense now until we go to the practical side. But I just want you to know what the increment and the decrement operator mean and the different types as well. So increment is to increase by 1. Decrement is decreasing by 1. And the post means after, the pre means before. So the post decrement is when the value is assigned first, and then the decrement is done later on. While the pre-decrement is that the decrement is done, and then the new value is then used or assigned in the expression or the code we want to use it. And then the other type of the unary operator we have is this exclamation mark that basically says, or it means the logical not operator, and it is used for inverting a Boolean value. We're going to do all of this in the practical side, so you would basically get an understanding of what I'm speaking about. So I'm going to create another class, Java class in here called unary operators. So the unary operators and I'm going to declare a couple of variables in here. And I want us to pay close attention. So we have integer x, assigning a value of 100, integer y, and I'm going to give it this value. And then we have integer z that has this value. So when you see something like x plus plus, this means actually it's going to be the plus plus first. So I'm actually meant to call this the I will call this the increment operator. Right. So I'm going to call this the increment operator because that's what we're going to deal with first. So when you see something like the x plus plus, this means post increment, that is afterwards, because the plus plus is after the x. But when you see something like the plus plus x, this means pre-increment, and this is before the x. The plus plus is before the x. That is pre-increment. If the plus plus is after the x, then that means it is post-increment. So now we're going to do some logical calculations, and I'm just going to have, so I'm going to do some logical calculations here to get the values of X, Y, and Z. X, Y, and Z. And I want us to do it before we run the code itself. So we have X has a value of 100. So I'm going to put 100 down here. And then we have X plus plus. This is X post increment of X. So if we go back to our presentation slide, post increment means that the value is assigned first and then incremented laterwards. So if we go back to our code, we have the value of X is 100, and that's going to be assigned to Y. The value is assigned first. Y equals 100, and then the value of X is increased by 1 because we have a post increment. So the value of X here changes to 101. Then we want to get the value of Z. So what's the value of X now? 101. And then we have a pre-increment of X. And what does pre-increment mean? Pre-increment means the value is increased and then it is assigned. So if we want to get the value of Z now, we have a pre-increment of X. The value of X is 101 and Z is a pre-increment of X. Pre-increment means you add it first, then you assign. So we have 101 plus 1. That's our Z will now take 102. And then once the Z takes the value of 102, then the new value of X is then assigned. So X is now 102. I hope that wasn't confusing, but if we run our code now, we should expect these values to show. So let me try to run it now. Get the right one. Oh, I've not even printed them out. Sorry, it's not going to show. I need to print them out. And once I've done this, I'm going to look through anyone that has any question regarding this one. So the value of X, Y, and Z now should be 102, 100, and 102. So let's try to run this one now. We have 102, 100, and 102. So I'm going to look through the questions. Does anyone have any question regarding this? Before we go on to the decrement operator. Okay, I'm going to try to re-explain. Yeah, it can be a bit confusing, yes. So let us try that again. I'm going to try to bring the presentation slide up as well as my code. Oh, no. Yeah, This should be fine. Okay. So we have a value of 100 assigned to x. And then we have a value of x plus plus assigned to y. And when you see x plus plus, this means post increment because the plus plus is after the letter. So post increment, as is described here, means that the increment is not yet done, but the original value of x would first be assigned, then the increment is then done afterwards. So x plus plus means post increment, then plus plus x means pre-increment. The plus plus sign is before x, while in this case, the plus plus sign is after x. So y has a value of post increment of x and z has a value of pre-increment of x. So if we are to get the values of x, y, and z, I'm just going to take these ones out. If we are to get the values of x, y, and z now, we have to start from the top. So what is the value of x that has already been assigned? 100. So we have 100. Then what's the value of y? We want the value of y to be the post increment of x. And when we go back to the definition of post increment, the value is assigned or used in an expression first and then incremented. So we're going to use the value of x first and assign it to y. So x is 100 here, then that means y is also going to be equal to 100. But then x value changes because we have x post increment. So we've already assigned the value, then we need to increase the value. We've already assigned the original value of x, which is 100 to y. Then we need to increase the value of x by 1. That is why the post increment is there. So that post increment means that y value changes by 1. So that's 100 plus 1 is 101. So did everyone understand that before I proceed? I'm waiting for some responses. Did everyone understand what I just explained? Gerard, I'm going to go back to your question once I'm done with this one. So x wouldn't be 100 again because the value has changed. So the initial value of x is 100. The initial value of x is 100. And then we are trying to get the value of y. And in our code, we said that we want the value of y to be the post increment of x. That's x plus plus. And when you see something like this, you need to go back to the definition, like what does post increment mean? Post increment means that the value is assigned before we actually increase the initial value. I'll say like this, the initial value is assigned, then we increase the initial value. So what's the initial value of x? 100. So we assign that to y. So we have y equals 100. And then post increments means that you assign the value, then you increase the value. So you've already assigned the value to y. Then you need to increase the initial value, which is x. because that is what the sign says here. We need to increase the value post increment. So that's why we have to increase the value of x by 1. I don't know if you understand what I just said. Did we all understand that? So 1 is not added to y because according to our code, y is x post increment. And we always have to go back to the definition. Post increment means that the value is first assigned before we increase it, but we are not increasing the value of y. We're going to be increasing the value of x because the symbol does not say y plus plus. It says x plus plus. Once it says x plus plus, we need to assign the initial value of x to y. Then we increase the value of x by 1. So that's just basically what this line means. So this line means that the value of x is 100. Initially, you give it to y. Then the value of x then gets increased by 1, which is 100 plus 1. So that is why we have 101 down here. So that is why we have 101 down here. Then if we go on to Z, Z now says, I want the pre-increment of X. And what does pre-increment mean? Pre-increment means that you would increase the value of X, then you assign it to Z, and then you change the value of X. So that's what pre-increment means in this case. So if we get the value of X, what's the new value of X? 101. Then we said we want pre-increment. So that means we have to add 1 to 101, which will make it 102. Then we assign that to Z. So this is 102. And then we change the value of X to 102. Because pre-increment means that you increase the value first, then you assign it. So we've increased the value of X to 102, and then we've assigned it to Z. So that's why we have 102, 100, and 102. So I know this is a bit confusing, I know that, but it's like if you sit down to listen to videos or even read, you would also understand that what we've done here is actually correct. So I think this is where I'm going to stop today. I know like this part, we've not done the decrement operators at all. And there are also some operators we also need to look at, but I'm going to have to schedule another section with the admin. I'll try to look at the timetable to find out when we can always come back to this one. But I would advise us to go and look at the open resources that we have online and try to understand this before the next class. Because I've kind of explained it like 3 times now, but I know it's a bit confusing and you just need to sit down and try to understand it. But I don't know if anyone has any other question apart from this one. Okay, I know people have a lot of questions about the increment operators, and I would love to answer them, but I want us to first go and read some resources online. I know it can be a bit tricky, but I'm always available to help. And I would also schedule another section with the admin to talk about the operators further for the unary, the decrement and the increment operators, and also the other operators as well that we need to cover up. But if you have any other questions regarding to this class, please let me know in the comment section, and then I can answer them. Yes, you can always contact me for further Java installation issues. Just tag me in the Telegram group. I'm going to send the Telegram group link now for the person that said she was in the group. That's the wrong one. Blue sky. So that is the Telegram link. So any other questions, please? Any other questions before we round up to this class? You're welcome, everyone. So if we don't have any other questions, then we'll enter this class there, and I will the admin will be in touch regarding any other sessions that we would have in the future to look into the other topics we need to cover. But I would strongly recommend we go through what we've done today so far, even up to the increment operators, and try to read through the resources and also do some practical aspects as well. And if you have any questions, I'm not always available, but if you send me a message in the Telegram group, I would create time to help you resolve it. And you just need to ask questions, and even people in the group may be able to help you, or I'll be able to create time to help you as well. Yeah, so if you don't have any questions, that is all done for today. Thank you everyone for joining and for contributing as well. And have a very good evening. Bye everyone.